Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Joseph Hedden of Emmanuel Reformed United Church of Christ in Export. And when your pastor, TJ Lucas, asked me to say something about prayer during the pandemic, I wanted to share with you an idea about how prayer can be a much deeper relationship than what we normally talk about. So I'm going to just give you a quick overview of my understanding of prayer, my understanding of how we approach prayer, and how this can be helpful in a time which is fraught with solitariness, which is fraught with a lot of fear and anxiety and confusion. And I hope you'll find this helpful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about several varieties of prayer, and I'm going to start from the top of the list. The first thing I talk about will be the most human-centered prayer, the most complex prayer. And then as we go down the ladder, it will get more and more simple and less effort on our behalf. And I think that will become clear as we go on here. This is not by any means an exhaustive list of prayer. Prayer is multifaceted, and prayer is really, really diverse. So if your favorite prayer isn't mentioned here, don't take anything away negative away from that. Also, I want to say that one of the reasons that I explain this to people is because not every prayer works for every type of personality, and that's largely a trial and error kind of thing, and pastors don't often say that. So I need to say that to you, that different personality styles tend to be attracted, like, say, a magnet, to different particular kinds of prayer, and sometimes prayer is a trial and error sort of thing. All right, so in talking with God in prayer, the most complex way of talking with God in prayer is vocal prayer. It's the prayer that we all learned when we were kids. Bow your head and fold your hands. And say a prayer to God. You're speaking to God. It's also in our New Century hymnal. In the front, they have all sorts of services of worship, morning and evening prayer. And if you'll notice, those services are rather complex, with readings from the Psalms. I'll read one verse of the Psalm, and then the congregation will reply, and so on and so forth. Makes it very human-centered. It makes it very complex. You got to keep sort of an eye out to, what's coming next. That's not to say it's a bad kind of prayer. It's probably what most of us have learned. It's a fantastic thing for prayer. It's something that has nurtured us for many, many years. It's the kind of prayer that we have, as I said, that we've learned from our mothers and fathers. The second kind of prayer that takes it down one step, makes it a little more simple and a little less human reliant, is something called Lectio Divina, or sacred reading. You may be familiar with this if your pastor hands you a passage to read, and you are asked to focus on what is it in that passage. You may be asked to circle it. You may be asked to underline it. What is it in that passage that speaks to you? What is it in that passage that either positively or negatively draws something out of you, that connects to you? And Lectio is about that. It's about trying to figure out where we fit in the scriptures. And the reason it's a little less complex is because you're looking at the scriptures, and where you end up is where you end up. It's about the Spirit sort of nudging you in a particular direction. So there's less of me involved, but the Spirit sort of tugging on my sleeve, saying, pay attention to this verse. Pay attention to this one word. Why does that word speak to you? Moving down another step, praying with the imagination. There are all sorts of imaginative prayers entering into the biblical story. You read the story and then enter into it in your imagination. So you take a story like Zacchaeus, and you can climb the tree and imagine that you are Zacchaeus. You can pretend that you are in the crowd. You can imagine that you are Jesus. What are the sights and the sounds? How wide is the road? And again, this is what is brought forth in the imagination is something that's unique to you. Why is the Spirit saying this particular thing? Why did the story go in the way in which it did? What did I learn from it that I would not have learned if I had just read the story like I have 100 times before? I find this really, really helpful with passages that I know so well. I think I know them as well as the back of my hand. There's always more to discover. Lectio does the same thing, by the way. You'll find a word in there that you're like, oh, I never knew that fit in there before. I never realized that was in there. That kind of surprises me. But it's the same with imagination. I can't think of a really good example right now. I can kind of think of one person who told me that when they prayed with imagination about the baptism of Jesus, that they realized how messy the whole thing was. That they had never realized that maybe baptism is supposed to be messy, because we do it in the church and it's so perfect, and we have beautiful white clothes, and we're careful not to get any water on the carpet. But being baptized in a river, there's a lot of mud, there's a lot of sounds, there were people coming from all over the place. And that spoke to that person about their life and how they had tried to put things into a particular box, and that God was showing them that sometimes things are messy. Sometimes things are wet and muddy and complex. All right, moving down again to the Jesus prayer. This is from our Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters. I think it comes from the Russian Orthodox prayer. This is a prayer that I found really helpful when I feel sort of dry and I don't know what to say to God anymore. Because here you say one thing. You say, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's it. That's the prayer. You can say it while you're walking. You can say it while you are riding the bus. You can say it while you are in the grocery store. You don't have to say it out loud. You just say it in your mind. And it's a single aspiration. It is a single attempt to turn your heart towards God. Turn your heart towards God. And the people I know that have prayed this prayer, they say that this prayer is very powerful because you sort of get caught up in the understanding of God. You sort of get caught up in the speaking with Jesus without having to come up with a new way of talking each and every time. It's just one single aspiration of your heart. You want to be in God's presence. You want to be in Jesus' presence. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. It's just a way of tuning your heart or turning your heart towards God. A prayer that's very similar to that, another step down, which again moves another step into more simplicity, is centering prayer. Centering prayer is 20 minutes twice a day, and that's the recommended time, although not everybody starts with 20 minutes, of taking a love word, one word, preferably one word, a short word, trust, love, Father, Christ, bravery. The word is not as important as similar to the Jesus prayer as your idea that you are consenting, you are centering yourself in approaching Jesus. And there's two ways centering prayer can go. You just repeat that love word over and over again for 20 minutes. And what happens is one of two things. Usually in the beginning, when people are praying, they find themselves getting very easily distracted hundreds of times in a short 20-minute prayer, and their mind wanders. But every time you repeat the word, when you catch something, I have to go grocery shopping, or when you catch yourself wandering off, you return to that word. And what you find is that God is there in that moment, that you're turning your heart towards God the same way a plant turns toward the light. So that's the first thing that happens in centering prayer. So it's a success, even if you think, oh man, I really blew it. I was really distracted. It's still a success. The second thing that happens, and this usually happens after you've become somewhat familiar with centering prayer, is you will find that the word sort of goes away and that you are just experiencing God's presence. And it's hard to describe that. It's more something you have to kind of experience or know. That when you are really in centering prayer and you have offered your love word to God, you can experience this feeling of being in God's embrace. And you don't look for it, you don't seek that, because trying to seek it too hard probably will make you not reach it, actually. But you will find that you have trained yourself to come back to God each time with your word. And again, the word is less important than your intent of turning yourself towards the divine, towards God. So that's really powerful. But you can see how that's not very complex. One word, 20 minutes, and God holding you at the end of it. It's a pretty easy prayer if you can explain it in just a few sentences. It does take, I'd say it does take a few months, maybe years, to be somewhat comfortable with that kind of prayer, but it is something that we don't talk about too much. And then the final prayer that I want to touch on is one that is all God, and it's the most simple, and it's one you can't really do because it is the prayer of being connected to God, or prayer of union, I've seen it called. You can't intentionally do it because it's when you are connected to God, and it's all God. So that makes sense if you think about it. If we're saying that at the start it's very much human-centered with the vocal prayer, as you go down the list, down the ladder, it becomes more and more God, less and less me. At the end, the prayer of union is entirely God focused. And I think that prayer of union, I think that sort of covers all the other categories. That some people have an experience like Isaiah, when they're, Isaiah chapter 6, when they're praying in the church and they feel that union with God. They can have that in a vocal prayer when they're singing a particular hymn. Or in Lectio, they get Lectio Divina, the divine reading. They find a verse that speaks to them in such a way it shatters them in a good way, that they feel connected to God in a way they never have before. Same with any of the other prayers, praying with the imagination, or the praying with your heart towards Jesus in the Jesus prayer or the centering prayer. At the top, again, very human-focused, a lot of effort. Ask your pastor or your friends who are liturgists or organists how easy it is for them to worship when they're doing vocal prayer, when they're running through a worship service. And for them personally to worship, I think you'll find that's rather difficult because you're thinking about a lot of things. So there is a lot of effort and complexity that goes into it. At the bottom, when you talk about the prayer of union and centering prayer, in the Jesus prayer, it's more spirit-focused, it's more effortless, it's more about being in the presence of God than about me attempting to communicate with God. And the reason I share this with you today is because I think sometimes we think that the prayer that we learned in kindergarten, in Sunday school, is all that we need to get us through the next part of our lives. But think of how differently you are. Do you need anything the same from kindergarten? Your nutritional needs aren't the same as you've aged. Your tastes have changed. Your entertainment choices have changed. Your industriousness has changed. Your desire to find fulfillment has changed. All these things have changed about you. Your intelligence has changed. Your hobbies have changed since you were 5 or 6 years old. And so, why should we be surprised that our prayer life changes as well? That we need new ways to encounter new ways in prayer. Sometimes novelty really scares us because we want to be connected to God, and we don't want novelty. All right, my friends, that's what I'm proposing to you today. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your pastor. I'm sure she'll be able to talk with you about this. Thank you for spending some time with me today, and I hope your study is going well and you are in my prayers. Blessings to you, and I will talk with you soon. Thanks.